Hello, and welcome to A Postdoc's Journal, the show that takes you through my journey into and eventually out of academia as a postdoctoral research scientist. My name is Simit Patel. Hello, thank you very much for joining me. For those of you who may be new to the show, a very warm welcome, and if you've listened before, thank you so much for downloading this episode and coming back. And a special shout out to my new listener in Ghana. I saw that you recently downloaded all of my episodes. I see you and I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Please reach out to me. I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know what your story is. I'd love to know what you think of the podcast and how you came across it. If you don't already know, this podcast is based on my own personal journal. In each episode, I read out a journal entry from my own personal journal from about 12 years ago, back when I was working in academia as a postdoc, as a research scientist. And then I reflect on it, I analyze it, I try to make sense of it, and share my thoughts with you today with the benefits of 12 years of hindsight. Each journal entry tells a small piece of my story going through my postdoc, detailing all the toughest moments and the very occasional success. If you are a student or a postdoc, or if you're just someone struggling in academia, or even if you're just someone who can relate to things like imposter syndrome, loneliness, mental health issues in the workplace, I hope that by sharing my own personal experience with you, that helps you to feel a little bit less alone. In today's episode, we jump to December 2012, close to the end of my first year as a postdoc. This is another journal entry I did at the airport. I was flying back home for Christmas, back to the UK. It looks like I didn't have a lot of time, so it's actually a relatively short journal entry. My general memory of Christmases in that period of my life are generally not very positive. There was something about Christmas that just seemed to amplify all the things that made me unhappy in my life back then. Loneliness, not feeling like I fit in, social anxiety in some cases. But Christmas has always been a time of the year for me where I become very introspective, and in this journal entry I give a review of my academic performance in 2012. So please have a listen to the reading now, and I'll be back at the end to share some thoughts with you today after 12 years of hindsight. Enjoy. December 18th, 2012. At the airport, heading home for Christmas. The biggest thing on my mind in the last week or so has been how little I've produced at work. No publications, no data, no grant proposals, no presentations, no conferences, not even a poster presentation. On paper, as usual, I have really underperformed. I feel disappointed in that. I suppose I have been taking my foot off the gas recently. Certainly recently, I can be confident in saying that I've not really been majorly overworked or stressed, and my mental state has been pretty good. Mainly because of music and improv. But I guess the cost of reaching a work-life balance is the compromise one makes on the work half of the equation. The more one focuses on the life half of the equation to achieve a healthy mental state, the less productive one would be at work. I guess I need to do something extra special next year. I need proper targets and endpoints in mind. Get one paper out, get a grant proposal submitted, get some data together for a new analysis, do 2 conferences. My biggest worry right now is that my boss regrets hiring me. I hope he doesn't feel like he's made a big mistake. Okay, thank you very much for listening to that. As usual, I've written down some thoughts after reading that back and hearing that back. I've got a few interesting points that I want to reflect on, including the very damning assessment I gave of how little I achieved in that first year, my philosophy on work-life balance and how that's changed today, and I want to talk a little bit about how I was making goals back then and how that's different today. What stood out to me the most when I revisited this journal entry was how my perspective on many of these topics has just completely changed today. And to some extent, I think I disagree with almost every single point I wrote in this journal entry 12 years ago. So let's get into it. Before we get into the reflection, I want to ask you a quick question. Do you ever worry about your paper being rejected because the English isn't good enough? One thing I've always been good at is writing, but I know not everyone finds that easy. Perhaps English isn't your first language, or for some reason, the words you write just don't quite capture what you want to say. Good English can enhance your scientific credibility, increase the chance of your article being accepted, and speed up the peer review process. Whether you're a research scientist, a scientific writer, or part of a dynamic biotech company, I want to help you with my professional copy editing and proofreading services for scientific English. Enhancing the clarity and precision of writing has been an integral part of my professional life in academia and in the biotech industry for over a decade. If you need a native English speaker with a solid scientific background and a professional certification in proofreading to refine and polish your writing, I would love to help you. Please visit simitpatel.com, that's simitpatel.com for more information. Thank you, and now back to the show. I gave a pretty damning assessment of what I actually achieved in my first year in that journal entry. I gave a very long, very sad list of things that I just hadn't achieved. Most of that is actually true, but I was, I think, underestimating what I actually did achieve academically. And I was kind of exaggerating how bad I did. I did actually publish a paper in that first year, but I didn't consider it a real achievement because I was the second author on that paper, and it wasn't really based on my work, it was based on some other students' work. I was just doing the write-up. I did most of the work for the paper, but I didn't consider it my work. I think generally underestimating my achievements is another symptom of that low self-esteem and that chasing of perfection that we've talked about in previous episodes. It is interesting to note the types of things I listed in my long list of what I thought were epic failures. I talked about publications, grant applications, data, conferences, etc. Back in episode 6, I think, we talked a little bit about value systems and how dangerous it can be to measure your own value based on your environment's value system, not your internal value system. The academic value system, the value system in the environment I was in at the time, tells you that your value is measured by things like publications, grant applications, data, conferences. So in this journal entry, that's actually exactly what I was doing. I was judging how much I actually achieved using academia's bullshit metrics of success. When I reflect on that today with the benefit of hindsight, what I couldn't see was all the amazing things that I had achieved that year. You know, I had moved to a new country with 2 bags and a small envelope of cash. I didn't know anyone, I didn't know the language, and I was still able to build a foundation for a life using nothing but my bravery and my intelligence. And I've got to say, my bravery and my intelligence have and continue to be way more valuable to me than my publication record. They matter so much more, and they've carried me so much further in my career and my life than a research paper ever could. But again, academia doesn't care about any of that. The academic system doesn't reward or value things like bravery or intelligence. It rewards publications and grants. In this journal entry, I was trying to make sense of my lack of academic success in the context of work-life balance. I was seeing work-life balance as a trade-off. The more work you do, the less of a life you have. And the more you try to have a life, the less effective you'll be at work. That's how I was seeing it. It sounds like I was relatively happy with the life side of things. I had made friends at this point. I was doing lots of music, lots of improv. I actually said my mental state was quite good at that point in time as a result of that. In a way, I was almost blaming that positive mental state for my lack of productivity at work. But what do I think about that now, this trade-off model? I'm not sure I agree with it. Firstly, I don't believe in that division of work and life anymore. Work is very much part of life, not separate from it. I think that trade-off model also implies that a good mental state can only come from the life outside of work, not from work itself. And that's 100% not true. Work can absolutely affect your mental state. And I think that a positive mental state should actually help you be more productive at work and stay more motivated at work, not just something that happens as a consequence of not working too much. Looking back on it, I think this trade-off model stems from, I think, a very outdated perspective I had on how I viewed work. I saw work as something that is hard, and it should be hard. On some level, it's something that you really don't want to do, but you have to force yourself to do it. It's something that takes away from your happiness. That's just what work is. And that's why you should work on something that you really love, that you have a real passion for, because if you really love it, you can push through all that difficulty of it. I guess that's the way work was modeled to me when I was young. I never really witnessed either of my parents get joy or pleasure from their work. It was just something you had to do to survive, and it was hard, it was difficult, it was just not something that gives you a good mental state. And I think to some extent the education system teaches you the same thing. It's always about trying harder, working harder, challenging yourself, striving to do more complicated, difficult things. The path to high academic achievement is paved with frustration and putting a lot of effort in, pushing yourself beyond what you're actually capable of doing, and just being more stressed. And that inherently means pushing you further and further away from a positive mental state. More recently, probably in the last year or so, I've started to really change my view on work entirely. I'm making a real effort right now in my life to have a different relationship with work that's a lot more positive. I'm trying to get away from the idea that work is something that should be hard and it's there to make you unhappy, and I'm trying to reposition where work is in my life. Back in 2012, it sounded like I was positioning work at one end of a scale. In the years that I left academia, I was putting work very much at the center of my life. So I repositioned work in my life. Now I'm seeing my whole life a little bit differently. I'm looking at it a bit more holistically. I see my life as a whole, and the purpose of that life is to be happy living authentically according to my values. The various components of that life, activities, relationships, etc., should be in service of that higher purpose. And one of those components, of course, is work. I'm trying to make work a smaller part of that life than it has been in the past, and not so much at the center. Or maybe I'm just having a midlife crisis and I'm ultimately going to regret this. Time will tell. I do need to call out my atrocious goal-making skills in this journal entry. This is a great example of how not to make goals, and I think there's a really important lesson here for me and for anyone listening. I'm a lot better at setting goals today for myself. The reason this stands out to me so much is that goal setting is such an integral part of how I approach work and how I approach my life today. I learnt the art of how to make more effective goals much later on in life. These days, I tend to make goals either annually, quarterly, or monthly, or sometimes I make an active choice not to have goals for a fixed period of time, if they don't help me, for example. And I usually start by making categories for my goals. So, for example, work and career stuff, music and creative stuff, relationship stuff, family stuff, etc. And for each category, I figure out what I want to achieve for a given period of time. And that's like the main goal. And then I make sort of sub-goals, which are very specific, actionable, quantifiable steps that I can take towards achieving that main goal in each category. For example, a bad goal would be something vague like to make progress on an e-learning course I'm doing. That's a bad goal because it's not specific, it's not quantifiable, and it doesn't really detail the steps in how to achieve that goal. A better goal or sub-goal would be, I will do 2 sessions a week on that e-learning course for the next month. That's different and a lot better because it's framed as a specific action that I can take, and it's quantifiable, it's specific, and there's a time box around it as well. The other good thing about approaching your goals this way is that it forces you to understand what is in your control and what isn't. Sometimes achieving your goals depends on other people or external circumstances, things that are just beyond your control. And these are things that you just can't make these specific actionable sub-goals for. So by thinking about the actionable steps that you can take, you can feel satisfied that you're doing everything you actually can do to achieve that goal. For example, if your goal is to close a particular sale by the end of the month, that's not entirely down to you. The potential customer has their part to play in that goal, and you can't always control that. Framing that as a sub-goal would be something like, in the next month, I will send 1 email a week to that customer and reach out to my main contact on LinkedIn once. Those are the parts that are in your control. Those are actions that you can take to help achieve that goal. And as long as you've done those actions, you can feel satisfied that you've done all that you can do to achieve that goal, even if you don't achieve it. So goals are not just things that you want to do, like a 27-year-old Simmet thought. They should be actionable steps that you can start taking today. In this journal entry, I had very badly defined goals for the next year. No wonder I didn't actually achieve what I wanted. It was something like, I'll quote it here, get 1 paper out, get a grant proposal submitted, get some data together for a new analysis, do 2 conferences. Those are really vague, just really bad goals. What is surprising to me is that reflecting on it now, even with my relatively advanced goal-making skills today, I'm still not sure how to define those goals any better. My experience of working in research is that the steps are just very vague by nature. There is no clear set of steps that you need to take to get from where you are to where you want to be. I'm not sure if this is just the nature of research in general or just my experience of research. I was never really taught how to approach research in a goal-orientated way. None of my mentors ever seemed to approach things that way themselves. That behavior was never really modeled to me. The approach has always been just to try this thing, hope it works. If it doesn't work, work harder to try to get it to work. And if it still doesn't work, you're basically stuck. In my field, at least, which is not so experimental, it was more exploratory and like observational research. There are no clearly defined milestones that you need to go through to get from the start to finish. And most of the time, you don't really have the full knowledge of the full process. The approach is just to kind of try and collect as much data as you can as quickly as possible, then figure out everything else like statistics, data analysis, and in some cases, the actual goal of the study and the research question you figure out later on. So if you don't know the specific actionable steps that you're supposed to take, and the approach is really woolly and ill-defined, it's basically impossible to make these sub-goals to achieve the bigger goal of publishing a paper. I guess more generally, I prefer to work on things where it's clear what the steps are to go from where you are to where you want to be, or at least possible to figure them out. So that's just another thing that I think makes me sort of unsuitable for a research career, and certainly a career in academic research, where you have to be a bit more comfortable with those sort of ill-defined steps where you just collect a bunch of data and then figure out the point of the study later on, and then try to rehash and resell what you've collected. So there you have it. My reflection on this journal entry really forced me to think about how much my philosophy on a lot of topics, like how I view work, work-life balance, and the role goal-making plays in my life today, has really changed over time. A lot of these things I'm still trying to figure out right now, and so it's very topical for me. But it is still really great to have a written record of my thoughts from 12 years ago. It's a real privilege to be able to make those comparisons between my thoughts today, my thoughts 12 years ago. It really helps me to understand myself a lot better. That was my last journal entry for 2012. Over the next few episodes, we're going to jump into 2013, which was my second year of my postdoc. This was an extremely important and extremely difficult year for me. In the next few episodes, we're going to see what happened to make me take the first steps towards actually leaving academia. Make sure you subscribe on whichever podcast app you're listening on. And thank you so much for joining me. I hope that was valuable for you in some way. If it was valuable for you, please let me know. Please reach out to me. All my contact info is in the show notes. I'd love to hear from you. I have no idea how well these episodes are being received, so please let me know. Please talk to me. Until next time, please be kind to yourself.
Brood about it, brood until the day, one day I will find the words to say.
Thanks again for listening to A Postdoc's Journal. I've been your host, Semit Patel. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others who you think might find it helpful and interesting. You could also leave a review over at Podchaser or on Apple Podcasts. If you can relate to anything in this episode, or if you have your own take on this journal entry, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Blue Sky. Links to all my social media are in the show notes. Thanks again.